This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed. The Weekly Wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Kate Watson.
And I'm Claire Kimball.
Last Weekly Wrap of the year, Claire. We'll continue in the tradition that we started last year, which is to give each other a Christmas gift at the end of the podcast. You will have to wait. I have no idea what I'm getting. You have no idea what you're getting. They're supposed to be news related.
Yes.
Okay, good. Mine is
or relationship related.
Yeah, or Squiz related.
Us related.
Us related.
Could be, yeah.
I'm kind of nervous about it. I'm going to lie, but we're going to talk about the news first.
Yeah, let's do that.
A few natural disasters of note this past week. Drones in the US. I insisted on that being in the podcast. An assassination in Russia and a really alarming scandal in Australian athletics.
Yep, and then Kate will give our rendition, our own version of the year ahead. Our podcast series, it's going to launch in the new year. We're talking to a few of our friends about the year ahead, as the title suggests, but you and I are going to have a go at that.
Yeah, so what story stuck with us from 2024 and what our news predictions are for 2025. What a weekly wrap to end the year on. Let's get into it. Most searched for news this week, Claire, was weather in Brisbane. And not because the weather has been, pretty bad in southeast Queensland for a good chunk of this year. Yeah. So much rain, very, very wet up there. But this is undoubtedly linked to the test match.
Yeah, because if you were interested in the cricket and you might have seen a little bit and then all of a sudden the oval was just completely covered with water, it's a reasonable question to go to Google and say, weather in Brisbane. What's going on?
I don't think that was what people were doing. I think they knew it was going to be wet. So they were like, is it on?
Is it on?
Do I bother turning it on?
See, I didn't check in with all of that until later in the day, and I just saw reams of water.
Yeah.
So that's why I went to it, is like something crazy is happening up there.
No, it was just a rained out test match.
Yep.
Of course, it was then a draw, which tends to happen when the weather is really, really bad. We look forward, though, to the Boxing Day test, which is at the MCG, of course, and then the final test in Sydney in early January. Cricket, no doubt, will dominate a lot of people's Christmases. Moving on to what happened in Mayotte last weekend, or on Mayotte, I should say. Must confess I'd never heard of it before.
No, I'm entirely in the same category as that. Hadn't heard of it before, but it's a French territory. It's in the Indian Ocean off the mainland of Africa. It's sort of northwest of Madagascar, Mozambique Channel.
It's in the Mozambique Channel.
Yeah, right. So it's the poorest of the French territories. There's been quite a bit said about that over the last few days around French territories that are around the world, and this is one of those that now has a spotlight on it, and how its relationship with France is sort of broken down, and France isn't really doing a great job of protecting these communities. But there are 320,000 people who live there, about 75% in relative poverty, so below the French poverty line. It's an area of land that's only about 371 square kilometres, so very densely populated. That sort of size is about the size of Albury.
Oh, you're kidding.
So it's about a regional city.
Very small, yeah. Why we're talking about it is that it was hit by what some are calling a century first cyclone Cheeto, last weekend. In the aftermath, the place has been described like a war zone.
Yeah, you only have to look at some of the images from that area to see just what an absolute disaster it has been. The death toll officially is in the 30s, but what they're saying on the ground there is that realistically it'll be thousands and thousands of people who have lost their lives. There's a number of reasons why we might never actually know the true numbers, though. And firstly, there's uncertainty around Mayotte's exact population. We said 321,000, but many believe that it could be much higher than that due to undocumented immigrants, mainly from the neighbouring Madagascar and Comoros.
Yeah, those are those neighbouring countries. You've referenced it before, but this has been a huge political issue for the French government. People are saying potentially 100,000 people live there in addition to that 300,000 odd. So lots of commentary about this event highlighting this problem. Also, the population is majority Muslim, 97% Muslim. French officials explained this week that those of Islamic faith aim to bury their dead within 24 hours. So that may have happened for many before the toll could be counted. Also, to note, by the time you listen to this podcast, French President Emmanuel Macron will have visited the island.
Yeah, and that's a really tricky visit for him for the political reasons that we just mentioned. Plus the feeling on Mayotte that the government has really been ill-equipped there to deal with any sort of disasters, not just in recent times, but for a very long time.
One of the things I really love about doing the weekly wrap, as you know, both of us had never heard of this place before, had no idea of the history, and you kind of go, oh, this thing happened, and then you start reading about it and you realise how little you know and how much more there is to know.
Yeah, totally.
And it's one of the great things about doing this podcast, but it's also one of the, you just realise how ignorant we can be of certain places in the world and what's happening there.
And outside of our, direct experience, there are things, and yeah, we do get to pause on this. When you see a headline that says that thousands of people have died in an event, it's worth pausing for a second, and we have the luxury of doing that.
Yeah, and I guess then on the flip side, a news story we heard a lot about this week was something within our sort of neighbourhood, I guess, and that is the earthquake in Vanuatu, a 7.3 magnitude earthquake on Tuesday, saw extensive damage. 14 deaths as at the time of recording this podcast. Of course, Australia is helping with that aid effort. The big concern seems to be clean water for Vanuatu.
It's a tricky area, Vanuatu, and to keep people safe there, it's always been quite difficult when it does hit into these big sort of weather, natural disaster events. So there's two large reservoirs serving the capital of Port Vila. They were totally decimated by the earthquake. Really, really tricky then to stop the spread of disease and keep people safe.
Subsequently, a very large increase in that risk of disease, of course. That's what authorities are saying is the biggest problem now off the back of that. If you haven't seen images, though, of that earthquake, I think for when you look at what locals have said about it, it wasn't, they usually get a warning when this stuff is going to happen. It just sort of suddenly occurred. And you can see just how large that was and how devastating that was. So a really terrible situation for Vanuatu. Australians evacuated from Vanuatu back to Australia. We've seen that throughout the week as well. Should we leave natural disasters there?
I think so. Let's do that.
Three more stories that caught our attention this week, and that's probably a good way to put it because it's definitely got this winding down news vibe. Like, who's really wanting to read the news this week? Anyone? I mean,
well, there's quite a bit happening
there's
still.
There's so much happening, but we've just picked things that you might have missed or might be interesting.
Exactly.
I guess. On Monday, you sent out a News Club newsletter, Claire, and the theme was the big news stories that will stay with you from the year. You picked the uptake in the number of women being killed by men in Australia this year, war in the Middle East, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, and for some levity, Mary Donaldson becoming the Queen of Denmark.
It's our Mary.
Our Mary. You got some feedback on that list, though, that you called out.
Yeah, I did. And look, squizzes are amazing. They are very, very kind. And whenever they give feedback, it's very gentle. So I did get one email back in the hello inbox. So that's the feedback saying, look, what about the war in Ukraine? Like, that's still happening.
You should have had that on your list.
Don't forget about that one. So, look, in fairness, we haven't forgotten about it. We do keep coming back to it, but it's a fair enough point because it's still a significant deal when it comes to that part of the world.
And it was a big news story this week for a few reasons. The first reason is the assassination of Russian General Igor Kirillov. That happened this week.
Yeah, so he was the chief of Russia's radioactive, chemical and biological defence forces. Imagine having that on your business card.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah. He was killed in a bomb in Moscow that was on the street on Tuesday. Ukraine actually put up its hand to say, yep, that was us. We were responsible for that. It's said to be one of the most brazen operations since the start of the Ukraine war, if you can believe that was 3 years ago.
3 years ago, it happened with an explosive device planted in a scooter that was detonated near the entryway to a residential building that killed him and his aide. Kirillov might be the highest profile Russian target killed, but it's certainly not the first time Ukraine has pulled off something like this.
No, if you go a quick Google, you'll see there's been a couple of car bombs. Remember the one, I couldn't believe it was from 2022. I thought it was this year, but there was a car bomb targeted at an ultra-nationalist, Russian nationalist,
That's
and
right.
it killed his daughter. That was quite a big news story, but it was in 2022. There have also been a couple of other big military names who have been killed, but this is the biggest. And as for why they targeted him, one expert that gave a really full account of it said that it could be retaliation for the use of chemical weapons in the war in Ukraine.
On the Ukrainian battlefield.
Exactly. And also to send a message to other big military names in Moscow that we've got you. We've got our eye on you.
So that was the first thing that happened with regards to the Ukraine-Russia war this week. What's the second? It was the US military.
Yeah, so the US military this week gave an update to say that they believe that North Korean fighters have actually joined Russian troops on the battlefield.
So we didn't know that before. This is in the region of Kursk, where you hear a lot about Kursk in the news, where Russia has been trying to recapture their territory after Ukraine took parts of it in that surprise offensive. Was that in August?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That seems like
I know,
a
time is
second
such a
ago.
warp, yeah.
But at this stage, we don't know how many North Korean troops are actually involved or what their plan is.
Yeah, we don't know that, but we also don't know whether they'll actually be deployed within Ukraine, which is a whole other level of engagement. There's been some talk for some weeks about North Korean troops actually leaving North Korea and heading to be trained. But the idea of them actually being deployed was just another big step to take. So it looks like that has happened. We don't know really, though, exactly whether they would enter the enemy ground.
We've got that phrase coming up again, though, escalating tension in the region, escalating conflict in the region. It might be, sadly, the phrase of 2024.
Yeah, because another government getting involved actually does escalate things quite significantly. So you can imagine NATO, all of those countries really looking to the network to say, what are we doing if other countries are getting involved in all of this? Just to round it all out, to round out Ukrainian-related news, Australia has reopened our embassy in Kyiv. Penny Wong, our foreign minister, was there to do that.
Yeah, she made that announcement on Thursday. We closed our embassy there when the war broke out. There's been a lot of political back and forth ever since. What Wong said was its reopening was a sign that Australia continues to stand with Ukraine against Russia's illegal, unprovoked, this is her quote, unjustified and immoral invasion.
Yep, that's a big deal.
Moving on to athletics news now, pole vault to be specific. You and I had a long text exchange about this one last weekend and it stuck with both of us and it has been running in the Australian newspaper across the week. But it was last Saturday that the Weekend Australian splashed on its front page with accusations that Alex Parnov, who was Australia's best pole vault coach for many years, was a sexual predator.
Yeah, and that he preyed upon Nina Kennedy, who won gold for Australia in Paris.
She was the story of 2024, wasn't she?
Remember her parents, her father's reaction, it was one of the best stories of the Games. Her and at least 8 other female athletes in his care. The accounts from these women are really awful. If you want to look at the reporting on that, the detail that they go into, what they say this bloke did to them is really, really horrendous. They tell a very common story, though, of being groomed, of being propositioned, of being sexually harassed and inappropriately touched.
Well, yeah, and I guess all of these are obviously just allegations at this point, but just to who he is, he's Russian. He came to Australia in the late 90s. He ultimately set up in Perth with the West Australian Institute of Sport. He's thought to be back in Russia these days after he quit in 2019 during an investigation over claims of inappropriate behaviour. That doesn't seem to be the whole story, though.
It's not the whole story. The other part of this story is that the girls and women who did complain were ignored by the West Australian Institute of Sport and that they kept it secret for about 15 years or so. So what was investigated and what was kept secret over the years has really put another cloud over the institute. It's not the first time that they've been in trouble in recent times. In fact, a couple of years ago, there were 57 former gymnasts who went public to say that their allegations of abuse in the program that the West Australian Institute of Sport ran was a really big problem and that it wasn't dealt with. The institute was in a lot of trouble for its poor handling of those claims. Also, there were just these broader sort of cultural issues that came to light once they were put under the microscope, and that saw a clean out of the board.
Yeah, and I guess the hope was the page had been turned, things were on the up. So a lot of disappointment that this issue hadn't been dealt with, this current issue around Parnov wasn't dealt with at the time. They also sacked another top coach, Paul Burgess.
Yeah, so Paul was an Olympic pole vaulter as well. He was in the sort of Steve Hooker era, a very much part of that West Australian pole vault program. He blew the whistle, though, on Parnov, and he recently, at the start of this year, started asking questions about, like, what happened with that review back in 2019 that they'd started? Why haven't there been sort of any support offered to these women? Why hasn't it come to light? So, yeah, he was moved on, and there's lots of questions still to be answered.
I reckon we'll put in people's show notes that big piece in the Weekend Australian because that really details everything, and it's not just it's accusations around money, like taking money from competitors. It's a whole list of things.
Yep, and
so
the police
very extensive.
look like they're getting involved, so it's going to kick on.
It's going to kick on, that's for sure. Finally, I have a friend who's been pestering me in the nicest possible way, I must say, because I love it when people pester me about the news, about these mysterious drones in the US. And I must say, it is quite a fascinating story.
Yes.
It's become a really big deal this week because both Donald Trump and Joe Biden have commented on the sightings, as they're being referred to. This has been going on for weeks now, though.
Yeah, because people have been sharing videos and photos. I've been seeing them popping through. CNN is a really great website for this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
They do actually surface this sort of stuff, the lighter, quirkier stuff quite well.
Well, we hope it's light and quick. Anyway, we'll get into it. Yeah.
There's sort of these pictures of bright objects in the night sky, which, you know, to you and me, they've got to be aliens for sure. The majority of these have happened in New Jersey. Other states have reported sightings, though, too. And look, the sightings alone isn't the reason that this is a thing. No one with any authority has actually sort of said much about it.
That's why it's
confirmed anything.
Yeah.
So the conspiracy grows.
That's right, and I think that's why it's grown a lot of legs. Or hopefully not. That's why this story is getting bigger and bigger.
Condemned by their silence.
Well, also the location. There are sensitive military locations in the state of New Jersey. Some have been sited close to President-elect Donald Trump's golf course in the town of Bedminster. So that's been a whole thing. It's all being exacerbated as well by rumours from a congressman in the state saying they're linked to Iran, that they should be shot down. The Pentagon, however, says they're of no threat at all. They don't know what they are, but they've said they're not a threat, they're not linked to Iran, and they're not aliens.
But if they don't know what they are, how do they know it's not linked to Iran?
Well, oh my God, here we go.
Here we go again.
You
right?
sound like Donald Trump. Tell us what Donald Trump said.
So, look, he's been asking questions. He's definitely one who wants to know and wants a bit more information on this. He said, this is his quote, "For some reason, they don't want to comment. And I think they'd be better off saying what it is. Our military knows and our president knows. And for some reason, they want to keep people in suspense." It's just made it all the way to the top. So Joe Biden had to come out and say something.
Yeah, so Joe Biden came out. He said later in the week that there is nothing alarming about the reports or the increased reports. Nothing nefarious, he says. They're checking it, though. They're sending some experts up to New Jersey to check it out. He said, we're following this closely, but so far, no sense of danger.
Okay. Well, everyone stand down.
People are really anxious. I mean, the interesting thing, when you read about the accounts from people who live there, they're quite anxious about it. There was one report I read which interviewed locals. There was every theory under the sun, as you can imagine. Foreign adversaries, little green men, secret weapons testing, every theory in between that. It's really captured people's imagination. Do we have any answers for you? No.
I'm wondering if it's just a kid with a computer software program and he's just going crazy.
It's surely more than that. But anyway, if you want to read a bit more about it, literally just Google drones in the US. You can go down whatever rabbit hole you would like, but that's the facts of what we know. Year Ahead, Claire. We are replacing What's Coming Up with Year Ahead.
Yep.
Each year in January, as you said at the top, we release a podcast series called Year Ahead, where we talk with our friends in news about the year that was and the year coming up.
Yep.
Given it's our last weekly wrap for the year, we thought we'd do our own mini version. What news story will stick with you from 2024?
It's really hard, isn't it? Because it's been, I mean, maybe every year we say
Every
this.
year.
It's been such a consequential year of news. I reckon the US election, though, will probably stick with me when you get from that first debate of Joe Biden. I think I've said it a few times now, but that image of him coming out onto the stage looking very old, that moment was pretty defining for me, right through to assassination attempts and all of that. It was just such an extraordinary election.
Any moments that are less, I guess, that momentous? I guess that's like a period of time
Yes.
of news. But was there like a singular thing? Like I'm thinking like you've got your Fat Bear Week
Yes.
excitement You seem to have dialed down the Fat Bear Week excitement. Are you a bit over it?
No, not at all.
Okay, just checking.
My love for Fat Bear Week is real.
I do
and
think
deep.
to give people
I voted every round.
Well, to give people a little tease of our Great Big Squiz Quiz,
Yes.
which is out today also on the Squiz Today show.
Yes.
One story that you loved
Yes.
from this year was the raccoon invasion. Do you want to explain that to people? Because I feel like that was a news moment that you won't forget.
Well, this is where Kate and I sort of diverge in news interests. You're not at all interested in anything to do with animals, and you humour us here at the Squiz. I love a great animal news story, particularly something like this where police get involved. So there's a lady in the United States. She used to feed the raccoons around a house. Like there were a couple, they'd come and they had quite a nice relationship for years. And then all of a sudden one day, all the raccoons turned up and she had to call the police.
There were. I actually looked at, this is a big hint for one of the answers to one of the questions in the quiz, isn't it?
Yeah, well,
if
that's
you've
true.
listened to this, you've got at least 1 point in the Great Big Squiz Quiz. But if you look at the image,
Yeah, that made me
imagine
laugh
just
a lot.
having a couple turn up and then one day just they all
looking
came.
out your window and there's hundreds of raccoons. It's and the quotes from the police are hilarious, which is what really tickled me. Like the police going, it's like the two of them let the secret out. And then all of a sudden they told everyone. So they all arrived.
It is quite funny. I actually have animal stories. But as far as animal stories go, I don't mind that one. For me, I was thinking about, the Olympics is any Olympic year, I think, is magic.
Yeah.
It's just magical. And I think there was that 2 weeks of just pure joy, great stories.
Yeah.
Certainly coming into the office every day, talking to people about what had happened overnight. There was just this sense of positivity, which was sort of unmatched and is unmatched for an extended period of time. Taylor Swift.
Yes.
Going to the concert.
Yes.
And, sort of being part of the news.
Yeah,
Is
that was
always
fun.
really exciting. Only when it's a good news story, of course. Princess Kate in the Photoshop.
Yeah.
I will never forget that.
Yeah.
Confusing, confounding, sort of a bit, what's the word?
Does it really work that way?
That
she
but
just
also
dives in and publishes photos as she wants.
Morally knowing that something wasn't right. You kind of felt voyeuristic. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was just this weird tension of such a strange thing. And then, of course, we found out that she was really sick.
Yes. Not that long after.
Not that long after. So there was that. But honestly, when I really think about this year, I think the amount I have learnt about the Middle East, and I hope everyone listening feels this way if we've helped them a little bit understand that part of the world, I will never forget that, because I didn't understand enough about Israel. I didn't understand enough about Gaza. Certainly didn't understand enough about the broad sort of geopolitics of that whole region.
Yeah.
And I feel like this year was my year that I really got across it.
Yeah.
Obviously there's so much more to know. Yeah. But I think a lot of people might feel that way about this year.
I hope they feel as literate, certainly, as I do, and I think you do too, around when you're talking about Hamas and Hezbollah and these regions, when you're looking at the West Bank and Gaza, and just that it's such a massive issue and has been for decades.
For so long.
Sort of we're here.
Yeah.
Understanding it a lot better.
Yeah.
Still lots of horrible questions about where that goes, but at least we understand a bit more about it.
I think that's right. So that's 2024 for me.
Yep.
News predictions for 2025.
Well, you go first for that one.
I think probably along the same vein, in the way that, look, I have a confession to make.
Yeah.
Whenever someone talks to me about energy policy or energy news or anything related, I find it really difficult.
I don't blame you.
To engage and access. I find it really inaccessible.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of us, I think 2025 will be about actually understanding that issue properly because we have to vote on it. And we have to make a decision around nuclear or not, about renewables or renewables are part of any solution, but, what that really means and how to understand that. So it's a bit like it's going to be forced upon us. So for, interested news consumers, I feel like at least obviously the first part of the year before we have an election will be very much defined by trying to understand energy policy. So look forward to it.
You and I haven't had this conversation offline, but did you watch the Chris Uhlmann energy special?
I did, and that was sort of my entree into, I can, and has a perspective, of course, but for anyone who doesn't know what that is, I think, what was that actually called? I'm trying to remember now.
Big Energy? I can't remember.
We will find out and we'll put it in your show notes, but it's Chris Uhlmann's documentary. It's free on YouTube to watch. And it is it really does explain the energy challenges for our nation. This is so heavy coming up to Christmas. Don't worry about it until the new year at all. But I do think it's going to be a 2025 thing that I think people who really want to vote on this properly will want to understand.
I know exactly what you mean though. Like when we started squizzing, I reckon like a year or 18 months into it, I remember where I was when I had to sit down for about 3 hours and understand how the energy grid worked and what the issues were, because it was the biggest story of the day and it was so technical.
Yeah.
And I couldn't explain it to myself, so I had to do the work to do it. It's really hard.
It's really hard. So there you go.
It's so important.
I think that's going to be our 2025 challenge. What about you?
I, of course, can't go past an election, and a federal election year is always like amazing. You've got Paris Olympics and Olympics. So Olympic year is my election year.
Yeah.
This is going to be the first federal election where Gen Z and millennials outnumber boomers.
Yeah, that's going to be fascinating.
Which is really interesting in terms of policies and who the parties are pitching to and how they're pitching, because, of course, there's a lot that's pitched at older generations. But both of the major parties really, really, really need younger generations to start getting on board. So how they do that and attract their vote away from the Greens or from independents or the Teals is going to be really interesting.
There you go. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know if we could have picked anything.
I'm rubbing my hands together.
I know. But It's so on brand for us to not pick anything that's remotely. I mean, last year you predicted Nick Kyrgios to win the Australian Open, so you've gone a little bit broader and a little bit bigger and bit up more ideas
well, I
based
think he's
this
going
time.
to be back. Maybe that should be.
Oh, no. Steer clear of tennis. Let's do our Christmas gifts. All right, Claire, who wants to go first?
Well, dealer's choice.
I don't know. How about I give you yours first?
Okay, lovely.
So, we've wrapped them, which makes so you can hear.
It's very pretty.
It's not that pretty when you open it. I'll explain it once you've opened it.
Well, I'm a bit concerned because you said you bought it on the way into the office.
Yeah. I might have to do a better version, but you'll get the gist.
I'll get the gist.
So as you open it, I'll just explain. So something happened this year at the Squiz that we spent a lot of time on, but we kept it very under the radar for our audience, and that is that we changed our branding.
Yes.
We had a whole redesign. And the secret is that Claire, if you don't know already, hated our former logo. She hates this face, which is the blue face of the Squiz, which is the
swishy lady.
You know, the swishy lady on our podcast. She does not like it.
Never have.
We are slowly phasing it out.
Yes.
If you haven't caught on. But I think it should be forever
memorialised.
Yeah, that's it, memorialised and hang above your desk forever on.
Oh, sweetheart, I never liked you, but here you are. Forever.
I will get you a better printout. I got it done off. It's not great.
I think it's kind of perfect because it's just a bit smudgy and a bit dodge and just not particularly polished.
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
We're ready to say goodbye to you, but you served us well.
Well, I've got something for you that I bought weeks and weeks ago.
Oh, no. She's going to give me a really good gift and I'm going to be completely shown up.
I don't know about that. So before you open it, which will take you 2 seconds, you and I share a lot of things. We have this sort of common history that goes back 20-something years. We, of course, have many years now working very closely together on the Squiz. But one area where I think we don't connect is
Not just animals?
astrologically.
Oh, astrologically.
And I think you and I, in 2025 could connect a bit better if you just embrace this thing. So I've bought you something to help.
Okay, I have no idea what this is. Last year she got me a huge tub of salt.
Tub of salt, yes.
Because apparently I take everything with a grain of salt.
So I think you and I...
Okay.
'Cause I've got one too. So you're a Libra.
I am a Libra.
And I'm a Gemini.
So what am I? I am cooperative, warm and artistic. Really?
Yeah. I'm adaptable, gentle and curious. And I know you raise my love of astrology, which, by the way, I read it once a week.
She reads
Mystic Medusa
every single week. She swears by it.
Yeah, and you've raised it a couple of times facetiously on this podcast, so I'm happy to bring you into the fold. Maybe we could do a whole stars section and we put our jumpers on.
Do you want to add a astrological section to Weekly Wrap next year?
I don't know if I can afford Mystic Medusa, and she's the only one worth reading.
Okay, that's true. Well, thank you very much.
That's okay.
Do I have to wear this every time I see you? Or?
Maybe we just need some special moments.
Well, you know what? I think this actually might fit over my bump as well, which is good. So Claire is the master of wacky gifts, and I am the master of terrible gifts.
Hi, Squizzer. Just to butt in here, we recorded that and we got pretty excited, and I don't think we explained it particularly well. So what happened was Kate gave me a framed picture of our old logo, the lady from our old logo, which, as I explained, I never really liked. So that's very pleasant as we're retiring that brand. And what I gave Kate was a sweatshirt with her star sign on it and a little explanation of her characteristics of her star sign. I got myself one for Gemini as well. If you want to have a look at those gifts, you'll find them on our Instagram page.
We hope you enjoyed Weekly Wrap this year as much as we did. How much fun have we had?
Oh, it's it's probably the highlight of my week.
It's so much fun.
I love recording Weekly Wrap. I love working with Annalise, our producer, who's done an incredible job this year.
Yeah, Annalise is amazing. Annalise Taylor, Yashka White, who does all of our video stuff, Carter Quinn, who does a lot of the editing as well, and the whole Squiz team. Ellie runs the calendar. There's a whole lot of people involved in getting this to you each and every week. Merry Christmas to everyone.
Yes.
What do you say?
Merry Christmas.
No, you always say stay safe.
Oh, yeah, you have to stay safe because people are moving around. And if you're on the roads and you're listening to this, just, take about 10K off. Stop and have a drink.
Yeah.
Just stay safe.
Thank you again, and we'll be back with Weekly Wrap pretty early, actually.
Yeah, we're back into it. You only have a couple of week deficit. We'll be back on the 11th.
11th of January. See you then.